Neon lights buzzed above the marketplace, painting everything in sick blue and green colors. The air was heavy with the smell of oil, sweat, and something rotten. Voices echoed through the long metal hall. Alien voices, deep and rough, laughing, bargaining, shouting prices. Cages lined the walls, stacked one on top of another, each one holding a different kind of creature. Some were small and furry. Some had scales that shimmered. Some had too many eyes, and in one cage, near the center of the room, sat a human woman. Her name was Lena. Her wrists were chained to the bars, her ankles locked with metal cuffs. The floor beneath her was cold and sticky. She didn't move much. Moving made the chains bite into her skin. A large sign hung on her cage. It didn't say her name. It didn't say she was a person. It only showed numbers, her weight in alien units. That was all she was to them. Meat, something to be sold, something to be used. Two alien traders walked past her cage. One was tall and thin, with long needle-like fingers. The other was short. With a face full of shiny black eyes, they spoke. In a language she couldn't fully understand, but she caught a few words. Pleasure, rare price. The short one laughed, showing rows of tiny, sharp teeth. They looked at her like a farmer looks at an animal before slaughter. But Lena didn't look away. Her eyes met theirs. Her face was calm, but inside, her heart was pounding. She had been here for days, maybe weeks. It was hard to tell. There was no sunlight here, only the sick glow of the market lights. The only measure of time was the changing crowds, buyers coming and going, shouting for deals. Some of the other prisoners cried. Some begged, some screamed. Lena stayed silent. She knew showing fear only made them smile, so she sat still, breathing slow. But her eyes burned. If she was going to die, she would die without giving them the pleasure of her tears. A voice boomed from the far end of the hall. The auction was starting. The alien auctioneer stood on a raised platform. He was huge, covered in gold plates and tattoos that glowed faintly in the light. He shouted words into a metal horn, and the crowd cheered. The first cage was rolled forward, a scaled creature with 4 arms. Bidding started fast. Hands, claws, and tentacles raised high. The price went up and up. When the sale was done, guards wheeled the empty cage away. Next, they brought forward something that looked like a giant bird. Another bidding war. Another sale, another cheer. Then it was Lena's turn. Guards dragged her cage forward onto the platform. The crowd grew louder. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her. Some curious, some hungry, some just cruel, rare human female. The auctioneer shouted in a language everyone could understand. Healthy weight, strong body, good for pleasure or display. The crowd laughed and murmured. Some aliens started shouting numbers offers. The price climbed quickly. Lena kept her face still, but her fingers curled into fists. She wanted to scream, to curse them all, but she didn't. Then she noticed him in the back of the crowd. Half hidden by shadows stood a figure in a long brown cloak. The hood was pulled low over his face. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't looking at the sign on her cage. He was looking at her eyes. The bidding continued higher. Higher. The cloaked figure raised his hand. The price jumped sharply. The crowd gasped. No one expected such a high offer so soon. The other bidders hesitated, then shouted higher numbers. The cloaked figure raised again. Another gasp. Some dropped out. Shaking their heads, the price was now more than most creatures here had sold for. Lena didn't know who he was. She didn't know if he was better or worse than the others. But something about the way he looked at her made her heart beat faster. Not fear. Exactly something else. It was like he saw something the others didn't. Finally, the other bidders gave up. The auctioneer banged a metal staff against the floor. Sold. He shouted. The crowd clapped. Some cheered, some muttered in confusion. The cloaked figure stepped forward, pulling a small case from under his cloak. He handed it to the auctioneer payment. Then he walked straight to Lena's cage. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then he reached up and pulled back his hood. Under the hood was a human face, a man, maybe in his late 30s. With a scar running down his jaw, his eyes were sharp, focused. Lena's breath caught in her throat. The man unlocked her cage, stepped inside, and knelt beside her, without a word. He took out a small tool and cut the chain at her wrists. The sound of metal snapping echoed through the hall. The crowd went silent. Then, slowly, the man helped her to her feet. Somewhere deep in the market, alarms began to wail. The alarms didn't stop the crowd at first. The noise only made the alien traders lean in closer, curious to see what would happen next. Guards rushed toward the platform, weapons in their hands. But the cloaked man, now hoodless, didn't even flinch. His presence was calm, almost too calm. As if he had been in situations far worse than this, Lena stumbled slightly as she stood, her legs weak from days in the cage. He caught her by the arm, steadying her with a surprising gentleness. The crowd watched in silence. Some looked entertained. Others looked angry in the alien market. You didn't touch the goods until you had fully paid and left the floor. But this man acted like the rules were written for someone else. The auctioneer's golden plates flickered in irritation. "You have paid," he growled, "but the girl is not yours until she is weighed again for the record." The man looked at him, his voice low and steady. "She is mine now, not," shouted, not aggressive, but said in a way that left no space for argument. Still, the guards didn't stop. 4 of them came up the ramp, their alien boots clanging on the metal. One had a long shock staff, another a plasma blade. The leader stepped forward, mandibles clicking. "You leave with her only when the black ledger says so." The guard hissed, "That's the law here." The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached inside his cloak and pulled out something small, a silver disc no bigger than his palm. He pressed his thumb against it. A holographic seal appeared in the air, spinning slowly. It wasn't an alien symbol. It was human. The crowd murmured. Most of them had never seen that seal before. Some recognized it and took a step back. It was the mark of the Outer Terran Alliance, a human group that was whispered about in dark corners of the galaxy. Rumors said they didn't just survive the alien hunts. They fought back. The guard froze for half a second. The man saw his hesitation and moved fast. He stepped forward, hitting the shock staff away with the side of his hand. The plasma blade swung toward him, but he ducked and slammed his shoulder into the second guard's chest. The alien flew back into the crowd, sending spectators scattering. Lena stood frozen. She had seen violence before. Here, it was common, but this wasn't the same. This wasn't rage or wild fighting. This was precise, clean, like every move had been planned long before it happened. The man turned to her. "Stay behind me," he said simply. Then he started moving down the platform stairs, still holding her wrist. More guards came. He didn't slow down. He weaved between them, using the crowd as cover every time a guard got too close. He disarmed them with quick, efficient strikes, no wasted movement. The alien auctioneer shouted something into a CUM device. From somewhere above, heavy metal shutters began to close over the exits. The man glanced up, eyes narrowing. Lena followed his gaze and saw only one open path, a narrow maintenance door near the side wall. It was small, almost hidden, but it was still unblocked. He pulled her toward it. A guard lunged from the side, grabbing Lena's arm. She gasped as the claws dug into her skin before she could even cry out. The man's fist smashed into the alien's jaw. The claws released her instantly. "Keep moving," he ordered. They slipped through the maintenance door just as the shutters slammed down behind them. The sound was loud. Final, they were cut off from the main market now. The hallway beyond was dark, lit only by flickering strips along the ceiling. Pipes hissed and dripped, the air damp and metallic. "Who are you?" Lena asked between breaths. It was the first time she had spoken to him. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he led her deeper into the narrow hall, listening for any sounds of pursuit. Only when they reached a locked door at the far end. Did he speak? "My name is Captain Rourke," he said. "I'm here for you." Lena blinked. "For me?" "You don't even know me. I know enough," Rourke said. "Working on the lock with a small tool, you're not just another prisoner to be sold." His voice was still calm, but now there was something else in it, a quiet urgency. "You're a human in a galaxy that thinks we're extinct. And that makes you more dangerous than they can understand." The lock clicked. The door slid open. They stepped into a wider passage where the hum of engines filled the air, somewhere close. She could hear the distant thud of heavy boots. The guards were still coming. Rourke pulled out a small cum from his belt. "Dock 6. Now," he said into it. A voice crackled back, distorted but human. "On my way." Lena stared at him. She still didn't know if he was saving her or taking her from one cage to another. But she knew one thing. He had spent more money than she was worth to everyone else in that market. And when he looked at her, it wasn't the way the others did. He wasn't measuring her weight. He was measuring something else. Something. Unseen, the hallway shook as a distant explosion rattled the walls. "They're trying to block us off," Rourke said, grabbing her hand again. "Stay close. And when I say run, run." The hallway shook again. Harder this time. Dust fell from the pipes above. And the dim lights flickered. Lena could hear voices behind them now. Alien guards shouting orders. Claws scraping metal floors. Rourke didn't slow down his grip. On her wrist was strong but not painful. Just enough to make sure she didn't fall behind. They turned a corner, and Lena saw the end of the passage. A heavy metal door stood there, painted with strange warning symbols. 2 guards in black armor were blocking it. They raised their weapons the moment they saw Rourke. "Run," Rourke said. He let go of her wrist and moved forward like a shadow turning into a storm. One guard swung a blade at him. He caught the alien's arm, twisted, and slammed the guard into the wall. The second fired a stun blast. Rourke ducked the shot, hitting the wall and leaving a black scorch mark. Before the alien could fire again, Rourke kicked the weapon out of its hands and drove a fist into its chest. The fight was over in seconds. The 2 guards lay on the floor, groaning. Rourke looked back at Lena. "Move." She hurried after him as he opened the metal door, the moment it slid aside. A blast of cold air hit her face. Her eyes widened. Beyond the doorway was a massive landing bay. Ships of all shapes and sizes were parked on the steel floor. Engines hummed. Fuel lines hissed, far above. The bay doors showed a thin strip of black space beyond, dotted with distant stars. "This way," Rourke said. Leading her between 2 large cargo haulers, they weaved through the shadows, keeping low. Lena's legs ached. Her lungs burned, but she didn't complain. Every second they stayed here felt dangerous. Then she saw it parked near the far corner of the bay was a sleek, dark gray ship. It looked nothing like the bulky alien vessels around it. Its hull was smooth, almost like it was grown instead of built. The only lights were a faint blue glow along its edges. "That's yours?" she asked. Rourke gave a short nod. "She's called the Wraith." They were halfway there when a loud metallic clang echoed across the bay. Lena turned and saw the guards from the hallway spilling into the landing area. More were joining them. From the far side, weapons were drawn, and some already started firing. Bright blue plasma bolts streaked past, sizzling against the floor. "Go!" Rourke shouted. He pulled a small black device from his belt and tossed it behind them. The moment it hit the ground, it exploded in a burst of white light. The flash was blinding, and the air crackled with static. Lena stumbled, but Rourke's hand was back on her arm. Pulling her forward, they reached the Wraith. The ship's ramp lowered as if it knew they were coming. A man stood at the top of the ramp. Wearing a worn leather jacket and a headset, he grinned when he saw Rourke. "You? Picked up a passenger, huh?" "She's priority," Rourke said, pushing Lena ahead. "Get us out of here." The moment they stepped inside, the ramp closed. Lena felt the vibration of engines waking up beneath her feet. The ship smelled of metal and faint oil, but it was warm compared to the cold air outside. "Strap in," Rourke told her. Pointing to a seat near the cockpit, she fumbled with the belt, her hands shaking. The ship lifted off the floor just as heavy impacts rattled the hull. The guards were firing from below in the pilot's seat. The man in the leather jacket worked fast. "Bay doors aren't open yet," he said. "They'll never open them for us," Rourke replied. The pilot glanced at him. "You're not thinking I am?" Rourke said. "Hit the forward shields to maximum." Lena didn't understand until the ship suddenly tilted forward. Her stomach lurched as the Wraith shot across the bay, engines roaring. The black strip of space ahead was still blocked by the massive bay doors. They weren't slowing down. The impact came like a thunderclap. The forward shields flared bright blue as they smashed through the doors, tearing metal apart. Then, suddenly, silence. The ship was in open space, stars rushing past, but the silence didn't last. An alarm blared inside the cockpit. "Two ships on our tail," the pilot said. Rourke dropped into the co-pilot's seat, fingers flying over the controls. "They'll try to lock weapons, keep us low and fast." The ship banked hard. Weaving between scattered chunks of old wreckage floating in the black, Lena gripped the seat, eyes wide. The alien ships behind them fired. Plasma bolts streaking past. Rourke glanced back at her. "You ever flown before?" She shook her head. "Good," he said. "Then you won't be scared to try something new." He tapped a sequence on the console, and a small screen lit up in front of her. It showed a map of the wreck field with moving red dots. The enemy ships. "I need you to watch this and tell me when they split up," Rourke said. She swallowed hard but nodded, her eyes locked on the screen, tracking the movement. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then she saw it, one red dot breaking left. "Now?" she shouted. Rourke slammed a control, and the Wraith spun in a sharp arc. The maneuver put the two alien ships in each other's firing path. One fired, and the plasma bolt hit its own ally. The damaged ship spun out of control, drifting into the wreckage. One down, the pilot grinned. The second ship tried to chase them, but Rourke pushed the engines to full. Stars blurred into streaks as the Wraith jumped to faster-than-light speed. The danger, for now, was behind them. Lena leaned back, heart racing, her hands still shook. But she realized she wasn't just scared anymore. She was awake, alive. And whoever Captain Rourke really was, he had just stolen her from the galaxy's black market under their noses. Something told her this was only the beginning. The stars outside the cockpit stretched into thin silver lines as the Wraith slipped deeper into faster-than-light travel. The hum of the engine softened into a steady, almost soothing rhythm inside. The air felt still for the first time since Lena had met Captain Rourke. She sat in the co-pilot's seat, still strapped in, trying to calm her breathing. Her hands ached from gripping the seat too hard. Her mind was a blur. The cage, the market, the escape, the chase through space. It all felt unreal, like a nightmare that hadn't decided whether to end or get worse. Rourke unbuckled and stood. "Come with me," he said. His tone calm but carrying an edge. She hesitated, glancing at the pilot. The man in the leather jacket gave her a quick nod. "Go on. He's not the talking type unless it's important." Rourke led her down a narrow corridor, past small storage lockers and crew bunks, until they reached a door at the far end. It slid open with a hiss, revealing a dimly lit room filled with holographic displays. In the center, a circular table projected a map of the galaxy. Some star systems glowed red. Others were marked with blue symbols she didn't recognize. Lena stepped inside slowly. "What is this place?" she asked. "Our war room," Rourke said, "though most call it the memory chamber." She frowned. "Memory?" He tapped the edge of the table, zooming the map in on a cluster of red systems. "These are the sectors controlled by the syndicates," he said. "The ones who bought and sold you. They own entire planets, whole markets. And humans. We're rare to them now. Rare enough to be a luxury item, rare enough to be hunted." Lena's stomach tightened. She'd known, of course, that humans weren't common out here. Hearing it laid out so plainly made her skin feel cold. Rourke turned to her, his eyes steady. "You're not just rare, Lena. You're important." She let out a short, bitter laugh. "Important?" "They sold me by weight." He didn't smile. "That's because they don't know the truth, and most humans don't either." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small metal sphere. It was smooth and silver, no bigger than a clenched fist. When he placed it on the table, it lit up with a faint blue glow. "This is a memory core," he said. "It holds the recorded thoughts, skills, and history of people long gone." Lena stared at it. "You mean? Like IE data?" "Not exactly," Rourke said. "This one is human, pure human memory, before the syndicates took over. The Outer Terran Alliance stored fragments of our culture, our science, our instincts in these cores. Only a few survived. And each one can only be unlocked by someone whose genetic markers match the original creators." He looked directly at her. "Your DNA matches one of them." Lena blinked. Unsure if she had heard him right. "You're saying this thing needs me." "It's not just need," Rourke said. "It won't open for anyone else. It recognizes you as the last living link to a part of humanity the syndicates have tried to erase." Her mouth went dry. She didn't know whether to feel honored or terrified. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "I'm nobody." Rourke shook his head. "You're not nobody. You're a key." The table projection shifted, showing a hidden route through syndicate space. Points along the route flashed with blue markers. "These are the other cores we've tracked down," Rourke said. "If we gather them, we can rebuild the memory network, a living record of who we were. Not just for us, but for every human still out there hiding, running, or chained in." Some alien market. Lena stepped back from the table. Her mind was spinning just hours ago. Her only thought had been survival, keeping her head down and hoping the next buyer wouldn't be too cruel. Now Rourke was talking about restoring humanity, fighting the syndicates, changing the galaxy. "You think I can do that?" she asked. "I don't think," Rourke said. "I know." Before she could answer, the intercom crackled. The pilot's voice came through. "Captain, you'd better get up here. We've got company on the scanners." Rourke's jaw tightened. "They shouldn't have been able to track us through FTL," he muttered. He grabbed the memory core, slipped it back into his jacket, and headed for the door. Lena followed, her pulse quickening. When they reached the cockpit, the pilot pointed at the screen. 2 red blips were closing in fast. Not syndicate ships, something smaller, faster. "Bounty hunters," the pilot said. "They must have tagged us before we jumped." Rourke glanced at Lena. "This is what I meant when I said you were valuable. Everyone who knows what you can do will want you. The ones who don't will want you dead before they find out." The pilot's hands moved over the controls. "Captain, they're hailing us. You want me to answer?" Rourke shook his head. "Not yet. Let's see if they really want to talk, or if they just want to fight." Lena stared at the approaching blips on the screen. She didn't know what was worse, being caged in the market or being free and hunted. But there was no cage here, no walls to hide behind. if what Rourke said was true. The galaxy was about to know her name, whether she wanted it or not. The red blips on the cockpit screen grew brighter. Two ships, both small and sharp like blades, were closing fast. They moved with a predator's confidence, quick, steady, never losing their line. They've got faster thrusters than us. In open space, the pilot said, his tone tight, if we try to outrun them in a straight line, we're done. Rourke leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Then we don't give them a straight line. He tapped the nav console, bringing up a 3D map of the surrounding space. A field of broken rock and twisted metal filled one side of the map. A massive asteroid belt mixed with wreckage from old battles. Some pieces of debris were the size of cities, others no bigger than a fist, all spinning slowly in the black. The pilot glanced at him. "You're not serious?" "I am," Rourke said. "They'll expect us to run for clear space. We take the belt instead, lose them in the debris." Lena looked from one man to the other. "Won't that kill us?" Rourke gave a small smile. "Only if we're not careful. But we'll be careful, eh?" The Wraith banked sharply, engines roaring, and shot toward the asteroid field. The bounty hunters adjusted instantly, chasing without hesitation. "There." "Committed," the pilot muttered. Rourke's voice was steady. "Good, that makes them predictable." The moment they entered the belt, the black sky vanished, replaced by a maze of spinning rock and shattered metal. Some chunks glinted with the remains of destroyed ships. Others were jagged and sharp like teeth. The Wraith swerved between them, dipping and rolling to avoid collisions. Lena gripped the seat's armrests, her heart pounding every time they passed within meters of a spinning boulder. A flash of light to their left, one of the bounty hunters fired. The plasma bolt smashing into an asteroid, shards of glowing rock exploded outward, spinning into the dark. "They're trying to flush us into the open," Rourke said. The pilot cursed under his breath, weaving tighter through the debris. Then a strange shape loomed ahead, the skeletal remains of a massive alien warship. Long dead, its hull split open like the ribcage of a giant beast. Pieces of metal drifted slowly around it. The Wraith dove inside, its narrow frame sliding between broken beams and shattered decks. "They won't follow us in here," the pilot said, hopefully. "They will," Rourke replied, almost on cue. The first bounty ship appeared behind them, weaving through the wreck's jagged opening. "They're good," Lena said quietly. "They're paid to be." Rourke answered, inside the wreck, shadows moved strangely. Light flickering from their own ship's glow, every turn felt like a dead end. Rourke guided the pilot through narrow corridors of twisted metal. The hunters followed, one closer. Now, too close, Rourke's hand hovered over the weapons console. "We've got one chance," he said. "Find me a tight corner." The pilot didn't ask why. He just nodded and aimed for a narrow gap between two collapsed decks. The Wraith shot through with barely a meter to spare. The pursuing bounty ship tried to match the maneuver. A horrible grinding noise filled the wreck as its wing caught on a beam. Ripping the metal apart, the ship spun out, scraping along the wall before exploding in a burst of white fire. Lena flinched at the blast. "One down," Rourke said calmly. But there was no relief in his voice. The second blip on the scanner was still moving, circling the wreck, waiting for them to come out. "We can't go back the way we came," the pilot said. "They'll have the exit covered, then we make a new one," Rourke replied. He scanned the wreck's hull, his eyes stopping on a weak point where the metal had already cracked from some long-ago impact. "Bring us there." The Wraith turned toward the spot, engines flaring. The bounty hunter picked up on the move and swooped in from above, firing. Rapidly, plasma bolts tore past the cockpit, shields at 60. The pilot shouted, "Hold them steady," Rourke said. The weak point loomed closer. At the last second, Rourke fired the ship's forward cannons, blasting the cracked hull wide open. The Wraith burst out into open space again, the second bounty. Ship followed, but now they had room to maneuver. Rourke's hands moved quickly over the console, activating a strange device. A small sphere launched from the Wraith's underside, floating in the black for only a second before exploding into a cloud of metallic shards. "What's that?" Lena asked. "Scrambler mine," Rourke said. The bounty ship flew straight into the cloud. Sparks jumped across its hull. Its engines flickered. It spun helplessly as its systems failed, drifting farther and farther behind. "They'll recover." In a few minutes, the pilot warned. "Then we won't be here," Rourke said. Already plotting a jump course, he glanced back at Lena. "That's the thing about hunters. They think they're the only predators in the dark, but humans. We've always been something different." The stars stretched again as the Wraith jumped into faster-than-light travel, leaving the asteroid belt and the hunters far behind. Lena exhaled for what felt like the first time in minutes. She was still breathing fast, her muscles tense, but deep down, something had shifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was learning. And if Rourke was right, she was going to need every lesson. The Wraith dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a deep shudder. Before Lena could ask where they were, the cockpit windows lit up with the warm glow of a planet below. It wasn't like the cold metal stations she had seen this world. Had green valleys, silver rivers, and small cities tucked into mountainsides. But high above, hidden in the shadow of the planet's rings, floated a massive structure, a defense station shaped like a steel crown. "That's Haven," Rourke said, nodding toward the planet, one of the last human colonies still free. Lena stared. "You mean there are more of us here?" "Not many," he replied, "but enough." The Wraith descended toward the surface, landing in a small valley surrounded by jagged rocks. As the ramp lowered, Lena saw people waiting, actual humans. Armed but smiling, some looked worn from hard work, others carried scars for the first time since leaving Earth years ago. She saw faces like hers that weren't behind bars. They welcomed Rourke with quick salutes and cautious glances at Lena. He introduced her only as the one we've been waiting for, which raised even more whispers. But the warmth of Haven didn't last long. By nightfall, a scout ship returned with bad news. "They found us," the scout said, his voice grim. "The Syndicate traced the Wraith's jump signature. We've got ours, maybe less." Before they send forces, the mood shifted instantly. People rushed to gather weapons, reinforce barricades, and power up the valley's defense cannons. Lena stood in the middle of the chaos, feeling the same cold weight she had felt in the market being hunted. Only this time she wasn't chained, and she wasn't alone. Rourke approached her with a rifle slung over his shoulder. "This valley is our home base," he said. "If it falls, Haven falls." Lena frowned. "What can I do?" "I've never fought in a battle." "You don't need to," he said, handing her a small headset. "You have something better. Your instincts." He led her into the command post, a room filled with holographic displays showing the valley's terrain. Red markers represented incoming Syndicate dropships. Blue markers showed their own fighters and defense positions. Rourke pointed at the patterns of red. "They'll come from the east. It's the fastest route. But it's also the most obvious." Lena studied the map. "No, they'll fake the east attack, then loop around the north ridge. It's higher ground." Rourke's brow lifted slightly. "You're sure?" "Yes," she said, without hesitation. "They'll try to cut off your main force from behind." He didn't question her. He adjusted the defense orders immediately, pulling part of their troops to the ridge and setting up hidden traps. When the Syndicate finally came, the ground shook with the roar of their dropships. Just as Lena predicted, the first wave attacked from the east, a noisy, brutal charge, but Rourke had left only light defenses there. The real fight began minutes later, when the second wave came down on the north ridge. They didn't find an undefended path. They found explosives hidden under rock and soil. The traps detonated in a chain of fire. Syndicate soldiers scattered, some falling into narrow trenches lined with human snipers. The valley echoed with the sound of gunfire. Lena stood in the command post, feeding new adjustments to Rourke over. "The comes," her voice was steady now. "Pull your left flank back. They're trying to bait you into chasing. Move the heavy cannons to the west slope. Their armor's weaker on that side." Every order she gave turned the fight in their favor. But the Syndicate wasn't done. From the sky, a massive gunship descended. Its shadow covering the entire valley, its main cannon began charging, glowing with deadly light. "We can't bring that thing down with small arms," one of the defenders shouted. Rourke's voice came over the comms. "Lena, we need a plan, and fast." She looked at the terrain map, her mind racing. Then she saw it, a narrow canyon just beyond the valley. If they could lure the gunship there, it wouldn't have room to maneuver. She grabbed the comm. "Rourke, pull back your fighters and make them chase. Lead it into the canyon." Within minutes, the defenders began a calculated retreat, firing just enough to keep the gunship focused on them. It roared after them, firing wildly. When it entered the canyon, its massive frame scraped the rock walls, slowing it down. That's when the humans made their move. They had hidden explosives deep in the canyon walls. On Lena's signal, they detonated them. The rock collapsed on both sides, crushing the gunship under tons of debris. The explosion that followed shook the ground for miles. When the dust cleared, the Syndicate forces began to retreat. Their attack broken, cheers erupted across the valley. Rourke returned to the command post, his armor scorched, but his smile real. "You were right," he said simply. "That's twice now." Lena replied with a small grin. He nodded. "You're not just surviving anymore. You're leading outside." The defenders celebrated, but Rourke's eyes were already on the horizon. "This was just the first wave," he said quietly. "They'll come back, and harder." Lena looked at the valley, the people, the banners fluttering in the cold wind. She felt the weight of what had just happened and what was still to come. She had been sold by weight, treated like an animal. Now she had commanded a defense that saved a human stronghold, and she wasn't going back. The sun rose slowly over Haven, its light spilling across the jagged rocks that framed the valley. Smoke still curled from the north ridge, drifting lazily into the cold morning air. The battle was over, but the scent of it, burnt metal, scorched earth, and the faint tang of plasma fire lingered like a memory that refused to fade. Lena stood on a small hill overlooking the valley. From here, she could see the entire human settlement. People moved like ants below, repairing walls, checking weapons, tending to the wounded. Everywhere she looked, there were signs of both exhaustion and hope. She had been in this place only a short time, yet she felt connected to it in a way she didn't fully understand. It wasn't just the faces, though seeing other humans still felt like a miracle. It was the way they looked at her now, not as a prisoner, not as property, but as someone who had helped save them. Rourke joined her on the hill, his armor scratched and his rifle slung across his back. He didn't say anything for a while, just stood beside her, watching the valley wake. Finally, he spoke. "They're alive because of you." Lena shook her head. "They're alive because we all fought." Rourke gave a small smile. "Maybe, but you saw the enemy's plan before any of us did. Without that, they'd have taken the ridge, and this valley would be nothing but a memory." She didn't know how to answer. It was strange, hearing someone speak about her as if she mattered. For so long, her worth had been measured in alien credits, in weight, in what she could be used for. Now her value was something else entirely, and it scared her a little. Below them, a small group of children ran between the tents, laughing. One of them stopped when she saw Lena, waving shyly before running to catch up with the others. Lena found herself smiling without thinking. She remembered being that age, before the syndicates, before the cages, before she had learned what it meant to be hunted. The memory faded as the sound of footsteps approached. The pilot from the Wraith came up the hill. Carrying a small metal case, "Captain," he said to Rourke. "The Council wants to see you both." Rourke nodded, then glanced at Lena, "Ready to meet the people you just saved." The Council chamber was a large circular room in the heart of the settlement. Its walls were made from a mix of stone and ship parts, a reminder that Haven had been built from whatever the survivors could find. The Council members, 6 men and women of varying ages, sat around a long table. Each of them had the hardened look of someone who had survived more than one war. They listened as Rourke explained the battle, giving Lena credit for the tactical changes that had turned the tide when he finished. The oldest Council member leaned forward. "You understand what you've done, don't you?" he asked Lena. She hesitated. "I helped protect this place." "You did more than that," the councilman said. "You proved that humans can still think, still adapt, still fight in ways our enemies can't predict. That's worth more than any ship, any weapon, any wall we could build." The council voted quickly and without debate. Lena was given a seat among them, not as a token, but as a strategist. It felt unreal. Sitting in a place of leadership, she wasn't sure she deserved it. But she also knew she couldn't turn it down. Later, when the meeting ended, she and Rourke walked back to the edge of the settlement. The sky above was deepening toward night, and the first stars were appearing. Far away, she knew, the syndicate still hunted. They wouldn't forget Haven, and they wouldn't forget her. Rourke stopped and handed her something small, the memory core. She turned it over in her hands, feeling its cool weight. "It's still locked," she said. "It'll open when it's ready." Rourke replied, "Maybe when you're ready to." She looked at the glowing blue light inside the sphere. For the first time, she didn't feel like running from it. Instead, she felt the pull of it, the responsibility, the danger. The chance, the people of Haven began lighting the valley with torches and small fires. From the hilltop, Lena could see the flickering light stretch all the way to the ridge. She realized it looked almost like a signal, a message to anyone watching from orbit. We are still here. She thought of the alien traders in the market, weighing her like an animal. She thought of the price tags, the laughter, the cold chains around her wrists. Then she thought of the ridge exploding, the gunship trapped in the canyon, the look in Rourke's eyes when he said she was leading. Her voice was quiet, but it carried in the still night air. "They sold me by weight," she said. Rourke glanced at her. "But now?" She smiled faintly. "Now they'll measure me by the weight of what I take from them, down in the valley." The fires burned brighter. Above them, the stars shone cold and sharp. The war wasn't over, not even close. But for the first time in years, Lena wasn't afraid of what came next. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was the start of something the syndicates had tried to kill. And she wasn't going to stop until the galaxy knew exactly what a human life was worth.